Nuclear talks continue to unfold between Washington and Tehran, and questions are growing louder. Is the United States weakening its leverage just as sanctions pressure was beginning to work? Is a rush deal on the horizon? And without European, Russian, or Chinese involvement this time, are one-on-one talks a help or not? Meanwhile, President Trump has crossed his first 100 days back in office, with his Iran policy already being described by many Iran experts as rushed, inconsistent, and too early to judge. Legislation to tighten sanctions has passed with bipartisan support, but at the same time, the Iranian rial is recovering, and some Iranian officials are mocking U.S. negotiators as lunatics. Today, we're speaking with Republican Congressman Mike Lawler. He's at the center of these developments, a champion for tougher measures against the Islamic Republic, and a key figure behind recent congressional efforts to counter Tehran.
Iran is not going to win this. And so, the sooner they come to that realization and acceptance, the better the outcome will be for everybody. Iran is either going to comply or not. And if they don't, then action is going to have to be taken.
I'm Negar Moshahedi, and this is Eye for Iran. Congressman Mike Lawler joins us now on Eye for Iran. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
Before we get into the nuclear talks, I'd like to get to know you a little bit better. You've been a champion for tough measures against the Islamic Republic of Iran. Most recently, a few weeks ago, you chaired a House Foreign Affairs Committee hearing on strategies to counter the Iranian regime. You also helped create and pass a bipartisan bill to strengthen sanctions on Iran's energy sector, which is a major achievement. To start, can you tell us about that legislation and the impact you've already seen, Congressman?
Well, over the past 2+ years that I've been in Congress, containing the threat from Iran has been a key priority for me, certainly as a member of the Foreign Affairs Committee and now the chair of the Middle East and North Africa Subcommittee. Iran, along with China and Russia and North Korea, have engaged in an unholy alliance that has sought to undermine and destabilize the United States, Israel, Europe, and the free world. And unless we contain that threat and counter that threat, there are going to be severe and lasting consequences for it. We saw, obviously, the attacks of October 7th, which were perpetrated by Hamas and funded by Iran. They have been the greatest source of sponsoring terrorism around the globe. And their funding stream has come in large measure from their petroleum industry and the illicit oil trade with China. China purchases the vast majority of Iranian petroleum to the tune of $200 billion increase in revenues under Joe Biden's watch. And that is where the funding for the terror proxy network, for Iran's nuclear program, as well as their ballistic missiles program comes from. And so stopping that oil trade is critical. And that's why I have focused heavily on that with both the SHIP Act and the Iran-China Energy Sanctions Act, which we passed into law last Congress. And now
congratulations.
Thank you. And now the Enhanced Iran Sanctions Act. From my vantage point, we have to go after this illicit oil trade by any means necessary and go after those who are facilitating the trade, whether it be those purchasing it, the financial institutions that are facilitating it, the insurance companies that are providing cover for it, those engaged in the transportation, refining, or at the ports of entry. It is critical that we crack down on this trade. So that is what the objective is. That is why we have focused so heavily on this. During the Trump administration, first go around, this was a major focal point to cut off the oil trade. And unfortunately, the Biden administration eased the sanctions on it and allowed it to flourish. So we are seeking to crack back down on it, both from the administration standpoint and from Congress.
And have you seen any success so far?
They have begun enforcing the SHIP Act and the Iran-China Energy Sanctions Act, which the Biden administration was very, very slow to begin that process. Didn't begin it, frankly, until the final few months of its administration. The Trump administration has already started to enact sanctions on individuals, on companies, which is critical to really cut off this oil trade. So we're starting to see progress. Obviously, it is imperative that we aggressively pursue this. And I know from my conversations with the administration, they are fully committed to doing that.
Now, in advocating for tougher measures against the Islamic Republic, I can only assume that you've interacted with the Iranian diaspora. Can you tell me about your engagement and what that relationship is like?
We have a strong Persian community, certainly in New York. In my time in office, I've met with the Persian community and certainly had many conversations with the diaspora. They want change. They want, a more stable government in Iran that, is seeking to aspire to peace and not continue to be a state sponsor of terror. I think, the Iranian diaspora, certainly in the United States, wants to see, peace and stability in the Middle East, and certainly I know many, fled Iran, over 40 years ago for fear of persecution and obviously the instability in the government at the time. And so, there's no question there's broad support within the Iranian community here in the United States for the U.S. to take a much more aggressive posture towards Iran.
Now, let's turn our attention to the nuclear talks. Obviously, the measures you've taken are designed, as you mentioned, to weaken the Iranian regime. Are you concerned that the current negotiations or even potentially a deal could jeopardize the pressure that you've helped build? Now, I ask that question because Mark Dupovitz from the Foundation for Defensive Democracies, I'll read out a recent post that he posted to X. He said, quote, "The Iranian rial is strengthening. Are we already falling into the regime trap to undermine our pressure and leverage? We are supposed to be tightening, not loosening the pressure." In light of that, Congressman, how would you respond to that concern?
Well, we're certainly not loosening the pressure. I think the pressure is being tightened. Obviously, cutting off the oil trade is paramount to that. Obviously, what Israel has done to decimate Iran's terror proxy network of Hamas, Hezbollah, President Trump redesignating the Houthis as a terrorist organization, going after them, Assad's regime falling in Syria, Iran's air defenses being limited. That obviously has created a much more difficult environment for Iran. I think, the threat of nuclear weapons is what has been Iran's source of strength in the Middle East. And so, obviously, if we can avoid war, avoid conflict, you seek to do that. You seek to use soft power and diplomacy and only use military operations when necessary. And so, I think what the administration is seeking to do is to give Iran an opportunity to forego its nuclear program, period. And I don't think the administration has any intent of easing up on Iran. There are obviously, anytime there are discussions, there are things thrown out into the press that are not necessarily true or accurate. And so, I can say within my conversations with the administration, they are adamant, obviously, on Iran not having any nuclear capability whatsoever. So, We will see how any discussions go, but ultimately, we will have to be prepared to take action to prevent Iran from having a nuclear weapon, period.
And where do you think this is all headed as we go into now the technical talks, which are going to be a lot trickier, this dismantlement versus enrichment, et cetera?
Look, I think obviously these talks are in a relatively nascent stage, but they seemingly are progressing to some degree. So I think obviously we will see over the coming weeks and month how those talks progress and whether or not significant progress is made towards an agreement. Iran is not going to win this. And so, the sooner they come to that realization and acceptance, the better the outcome will be for everybody. We do not want to see all-out conflict in the Middle East. Obviously, we want long-term peace and prosperity, and that requires containing the threat from Iran and its terror proxies. It requires normalization of relations between Arab states and Israel, and really seeking to find shared economic opportunity across the region if we are going to be able to bring peace and stability and prosperity. Obviously, containing Iran is a key component of that.
And how would you assess the pace of the negotiations so far? I mean, this time around, it seems like it's a two-player negotiation, no Europeans, no Russians, no Chinese at the table like it was for the JCPOA, of course. In your view, is it better to have these bilateral talks, or is there some disadvantages or advantages to that? How do you see it?
Well, I think in this respect, it needs to be bilateral. The JCPOA was a disaster. I did not support it. I don't think it met the mark. And I don't think we need a JCPOA 2.0, which is precisely what the Biden administration was trying to negotiate when they first came in. So, look, at the end of the day, Iran is either going to comply or not. And if they don't, then action is going to have to be taken.
And if we look at the overall bigger picture here, we're into 100 days now of President Trump being in office. How would you assess his Iran policy so far?
I think it's night and day from the Biden administration, and he has certainly taken a much more aggressive posture, increasing and implementing the sanctions, putting maximum pressure on them economically. Obviously, the Middle East is in a different place today than it was 4 years ago when Joe Biden came in. Hamas and Hezbollah and the Houthis are on the run, and certainly Iran's stranglehold on the Middle East has weakened. So in some respects, I think we're in a position where there's opportunity here to finally bring about some stability. Coming off the heels of the last 18 months. So, I think the president has taken a much more aggressive posture. Obviously, Iran is further along in its nuclear ambitions than it was 4 years ago. And so, the need to address that is critical. And obviously, the administration is seeking to use diplomacy first. But if that doesn't work, obviously, other options have to be on the table.
And is there anything that you'd like to see President Trump be doing more of when it comes to the Iran policy? How do you feel?
Now, look, I think right now, obviously, the sanctions are critical, crippling their oil trade with China and cutting off their hold on these terror proxies and ultimately getting agreement to end this nuclear program or end it for them. It's one choice or the other, but either way, this nuclear program is going to have to end, and I think the president understands that.
A few weeks ago, I was in Washington, D.C., and I was actually hosting a panel event for the FDD on this maximum support bill, which is supposed to complement maximum pressure. And literally, as soon as the event wrapped up, I found out about the nuclear talks. There was breaking news coming in. I'm just curious, given your role, how did you find out about these talks? Did you have prior knowledge? And what was your reaction?
Well, I've been in touch with the administration throughout, certainly in my capacity as chair of the Middle East and North Africa subcommittee. It was very clear that the administration was going to take steps to try and get Iran to the table for the standpoint of ending its nuclear program. And so that did not surprise me in the least. I think many of us were of the belief that they had to give them a window to try and negotiate something. And in the absence of an agreement, I think the administration needs to be prepared to take action. So the issue of diplomacy or engaging in conversation does not surprise me. It's a necessary component as you are dealing with these bigger challenges.
And what did you think about the timing? I was speaking to some Iran experts, just wrapping up Trump's first 100 days in office, and some of them were saying that they felt that the talks are happening a little bit too early, that it's taking away some leverage potentially. Others said no, that in fact, the fact that he was able, President Trump, to get the Iranian regime to the negotiating table is one of his greatest achievements so far, actually. How would you assess that in terms of the timing?
Look, this isn't 4 years ago or 8 years ago. We're in a different world. A lot has happened. Obviously, Iran has been the greatest sponsor of terrorism throughout the globe, and we've seen the deadly consequence of that. And so, I think the president is trying to put as much pressure on them as possible, both from a financial standpoint, but as well, obviously, from the standpoint of their nuclear program. And they are further along today than they were 4 years ago or 8 years ago. And so I don't know how much longer people want to wait. It has long been the policy of the U.S. and our allies that Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. So are we waiting for them to actually be fully enriched? I mean, what is the delay that people would like to see? So to me, no, I don't think it's too soon. I think, frankly, this has gone on long enough.
And former Deputy Foreign Minister to Khamenei, his name is Mohammad Javad Larijani, recently said on Iranian state TV that he's, quote, the Iranians are reluctant talking to the U.S. in these nuclear talks, and he's calling the American negotiator, quote, lunatics, and that President Trump is a vulgar individual, he described him who makes him physically sick to his stomach. When you hear that kind of rhetoric coming out of Tehran, do you still view diplomacy as a necessary tool, or does it strengthen the case for potentially a tougher approach than what we're seeing already?
Oh, listen, I mean, Democrats in America say a lot of things about Donald Trump. That sounds tame by comparison, frankly. So, look, I don't really think it matters what is publicly said on Iranian TV. It's all propaganda anyway, so I think it's irrelevant to the actual negotiation. They, of course, will want to save face in any negotiation, but at the end of the day, they cannot have a nuclear weapon, period. So whether it is a negotiated agreement or by military action, either way, they're not going to have a nuclear weapon.
Now, President Trump recently said that Israel cannot drag the United States into war, and if there is some sort of war, and the United States would lead the charge. What is your take on that statement?
Well, I think the president is right insofar as nobody's going to drag us into a war. But, of course, the president has been one of the strongest supporters of Israel and making sure that they have the resources they need to defend themselves, as well as to aggressively go after the enemies of Israel and the United States. I think from the standpoint of Iran, the fact is that if there is a conflict, obviously the United States would very likely be engaged, because the fact is Iran is a threat to global peace and stability, period. And so long as they harbor, aspirations to have a nuclear weapon, there's just no ability for the U.S., Israel, or the free world to, sit that one out.
Now, what types of measures specifically would you like to see in place for a potential deal, for it to be the way that you feel is the right deal?
Well, no enrichment whatsoever. I mean, there just cannot be the potential for Iran to skirt the agreement in any way. And from my vantage point, obviously, the oil trade is paramount. To me, that is what has been the funding mechanism for them, for all of their support of terrorism, for their support of their nuclear program. So all of this is interconnected as far as I'm concerned, and you'd want to see it addressed as part of an agreement. But at the end of the day, the bottom line is they cannot have a nuclear weapon, and they cannot have nuclear capability outside of any potential energy source, but not from the standpoint of enrichment for a nuclear weapon, period.
Now, one of the criticisms of the JCPOA, at least from the standpoint of the Iranian diaspora, is that it neglected human rights. Do you think that that's to be like a separate issue, or would you like to see something like that this time around to address the issue of human rights violations? Of course, as you know, the United Nations declared that Iran is committing crimes against humanity against its own people.
Yes, and sadly, the United Nations has been inconsistent on the issue of human rights in so many ways. But look, I don't think there's any question, human rights violations have to be addressed with Iran. Obviously, what is most paramount is preventing them from having a nuclear weapon. Equally as important, however, is addressing, the issues within their own country and how they treat their own people. The human rights violations that persist, the violence that has been perpetrated against those who disagree with the Ayatollah and the regime, and obviously what they have done to support genocide and violence around the globe and in the Middle East, and what they have done to fund and support terrorism. So there are a number of issues, obviously, to engage on. But I think obviously as part of these discussions, what is most paramount is preventing them from getting a nuclear weapon.
And now, one thing we hear from Iranian Americans a lot is no deal, no deal. You cannot trust the Ayatollahs, that this is just a big waste of time, and that eventually they will somehow be able to get nuclear weapons, either by hiding, centrifuges and even with strengthened verification, et cetera, that this is not going to work. That's their view, and a lot of Iranian Americans, not all of them, of course. Now, so I asked Richard Nephew, a former U.S. negotiator on the JCPOAs and the architect of Iran's sanctions, and he argued that diplomacy is not a reward, and that despite its challenges, it remains the best tool, and that sometimes, yes, you do need to sit down with people that you may disagree with on so many levels. Congressman, where do you stand on that view?
Well, I think two things can be true. Obviously, they are not trustworthy. And, as the old adage that President Reagan employed, trust but verify. I mean, you have to negotiate in good faith. If your negotiating partners do not, then obviously there is consequence to that. But from my vantage point, you should always try to engage in diplomacy and prevent war or conflict or the use of military force unless absolutely necessary or unless there is an impending threat. And, from the standpoint of Iran, I think the objective is to try to provide the ability for the Iranians to make a wise decision. The chances of them doing that, obviously, are less than 50%, I would say. But, at the same token, it would be foolish not to try and engage in diplomacy first before being forced into military action.
So if the chances are kind of 50-50, there's still the potential then for military action.
I think, as I've said earlier, the United States has to be prepared. In the absence of an agreement, we have to be prepared to use military force to prevent them from having a nuclear weapon, period.
And just wanted to end things off on a lighter note. I recently, a couple of weeks ago, saw you on a CNN panel where you sang a Trump song, and I'm wondering if you could give our audience a little taste of that.
Well, this is obviously a parody, so hopefully folks have a
Yes, it pleases. Yes, it is. Yeah.
The song was a parody of a Beach Boys hit called Kokomo. Aruba, Jamaica, Panama, I'm gonna take ya. Bermuda, Bahama, Greenland, come home to your mama. Key Largo, Toronto, Trudeau, why don't we go? Off the Mediterranean Sea, there's a place called Gaza Lago, and that's where you've got to go to get some USAID.
Thank you so much, and thank you so much for being a good sport. I mean, this is coming out on Friday, but of course we're recording this in the morning. So thank you for being such a good sport this morning, Congressman Lawler. I really enjoyed our conversation. That's Congressman Mike Lawler on Eye for Iran. If you like this episode, hit the like button. And we'd also love to know what you think. Please leave us a comment. The Eye for Iran podcast series is brought to you by Iran International, the go-to destination for expert Iranian news in both Farsi and English. For more, head to our dedicated English website, iranintl.com/en.